in History with Mike and Will. I'm Mike.
I'm Will.
And that's who we are.
That's us.
And what we do is every week, Will picks a moment or a person or an event in history, and then he's got 1 hour to explain that to me, why it's relevant and why we're talking about it.
Yep.
And this week, I've challenged him to something in the 20th century. Ooh, since usually we talk about Europe in the Dark Ages and before.
The year 2.
Yeah, that stuff. So we're doing a little more modern one today. So let's check it out. Today we're discussing the Winter War, November 30th, 1939.
Correct.
Probably has something to do with Nazis.
Kind of. Yeah.
Would be my guess. Let's find out. We've got 1 hour. Ready, Will?
I'm ready, sir. So, while this war is technically the Winter's War,
Yes.
this entire episode is about a Finnish concept called sisu.
A Finnish concept. From
Finnish.
Finland.
From
not,
Finland.
Not done.
It's not done. It's not a finished concept. It is a Finnish concept. And this word sisu is like fighting spirit, toughness, to bear down and just take it and win.
All right.
Like it's
It is directly a war reference.
it's
or
it's
fighting-
but
fighting-
it's also
fighting.
it's a cultural concept as well. You know, the winter stinks. It's harsh and it's cold. Sisu.
Is
We'll
that
get through it.
there's also the thing where they'll sit in a hot tub and then go or a sauna and then run in the snow?
They probably do shout sisu. That would not surprise me. But yeah, it's strength. It's strengthening through hardship.
Okay.
Is a big Finnish concept, and it always has been.
Yeah.
Finland hasn't always been a country though. So up until 1809, Finland was part of Sweden.
Oh.
But the Finns are a cultural group that are spread throughout parts of like Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. They're the Finnic people. Where Finland is today, parts
They're
of
really,
Sweden.
really
parts
fussy about what they eat.
Correct. Yeah,
the
it's
Finnic
very
people.
particular. It's all
Oh,
pickled fish.
fish again.
It's
Ugh.
always pickled. If it's not pickled, they don't eat it. They're very Finnic.
It's not pickled, it's crap.
Yes. But so they didn't really have their own country. They typically all lived in this same region, but they were part of something else.
Okay.
However, Sweden and Russia would fight a lot because it goes Sweden, then Finland, then Russia.
And then the Baltic Sea is right in there. Like
Yes.
Between them, right? So
Yeah,
is
it's like down and kind of below. So like Finland is in this weird spot of you have like the Baltic, which is kind of the space between Germany and Norway.
Yeah.
And then you have Russia kind of cutting in on one chunk, but just a little bit. And then there's all these little tiny countries there. Well, nowadays they're little tiny countries.
Yeah.
Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania.
I'm of Latvian descent.
Oh, okay then.
So I know where Latvia
So
is.
you know where that is.
But either way, it might be helpful to have a map right now.
Yep, bing, bing, right there. So that's that's our region. So Finland is like a buffer state. It's this chunk between main and part of Sweden and Russia, and they don't really like each other. So they would fight, and like there were several wars between Sweden and Finland.
It's funny. I rarely hear about wars
In the northern
Nordic countries.
Yeah, they
all
don't.
just seem
It was like
too cold to fight.
They were like Vikings, and they're like, all right, we're not doing this anymore.
But even the Vikings, it seemed like they went.
They went elsewhere to fight. Yep. I can't imagine. Like, well, because the winter is so long and it's brutal.
Yeah.
So why?
Yeah.
Although they did fight and a lot, and they were very good at fighting and killing each other, but for a period of time there was a lot of internal stuff, so we don't hear as much about it.
Okay.
But Russia was constantly trying to expand. This is during its imperial expansion, the times of Peter the Great, Catherine the Great. Before that, we have Ivan the Terrible, and they're trying to really solidify power.
So they went from the terrible to the great.
Yep, they
Well,
got better.
They're
They
getting
got
good.
better. They got better. And during this time, though, they want more warm water ports because most of Russia doesn't have access to that. Like they go all the way to the Pacific Ocean, but most of, obviously in the north, that's all the Arctic Sea, and most of those ports are frozen. You can sit around in a little lake maybe. So like what is called St. Petersburg, and that's what it's called today, but for a time it was called Leningrad and then Stalingrad, and now St. Petersburg back again. Petrograd was also the name, but it's the same city.
Okay.
It was a warm water port in the Baltic. So that was a huge thing for Russia to have that.
Yeah.
And then they were like, well, Sweden's like 5 feet away from this. It's literally like 30 kilometers away was part of Sweden. So
I
they
can
didn't
see
like
my house from here.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't like that. So we'll conquer Sweden. And they couldn't beat them, but what they wound up getting out of this was they said, we are going to take what is today Finland and turn it into an autonomous country that we, as Russia, nominally are in charge of.
Oh.
But it's going to be its own little place. It's no longer part of Sweden, and it's kind of not really part of Russia. It can govern itself, and we'll call it a Grand Duchy. So Finland becomes this.
Finland was formed by Russia?
Basically, yes.
Huh.
Yeah, and the Finnic people were like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll take that.
We wouldn't have done this ourselves,
Yeah,
but okay.
we were fine kind of being
Sure.
here. And Russia, there's still a big population of Finnic people living in Western Russia. They're like, we're fine. We're fine where we are.
Okay.
But there was sometimes conflict there between
Sure.
like the different Finnish people on different sides of the border about, you know, which way they should be ruled and what works best for them. This lasts until the revolutions in Russia. There was the February Revolution, which was the overthrow of the Tsar.
Okay. That was in 18, early
1917.
19? Yeah, there you go.
1917. So this is kind of the state of affairs for 100 years. They're a Grand Duchy. They get involved in some wars. They mostly whatever Russia does, they do. But they're seen as kind of like we're not necessarily going to conquer these people, but if we want to get to Russia from Sweden, we have to go through there.
Yeah.
And Finland sucks to move through. It's all forests and swamps and hilly, and it has like 5 roads.
Okay.
It's just
And none of them are finished.
and none of them are finished. Ironically, they don't finish anything.
It's going to be Finnish
We're gonna make
puns
so
all
many
day.
bad Finnish jokes. And actually, on my family, my mother's entire side of the family is like Finnish. All of them. They're all from there. Like, not my grandfather, but my great grandfather. His family came over from Finland. So this is cool because I get to talk about like some ancestors.
The mother country.
Yes, the mother country, because my father country is the Dutch,
Right.
Holland, and I don't like to use the word fatherland because we also have some
that's a little
Germans
weird.
and
That sounds a little dicey.
yeah, you got the fatherland and the motherland, and both of them. It's like the Russians are mothers and the Germans are fathers, and I don't know. That's probably why they don't get on. Anyway, so in this revolution is when the communists oust the Tsar of Russia.
Yep.
Now, once the Tsar's
Anastasia
gone,
and all that.
yes, Rasputin, all of
Yeah,
these things feed
right.
into this. Then the Russians have done this, so the Finns are like, well, our Grand Duchy technically works for the Tsar, but there is no Tsar.
Uh-oh.
So
I guess
our
we're on our
country?
own. Whee! Freedom for Finland.
And they start talking about this idea, and then in 1918, I'm sorry, 1917 later on. So that was in February is when this happened. So all the way up into December, 4th of December 1917, Finland declares its independence, their own country.
Yeah.
Not long after
Sounds
that,
fair to me, really.
because Russia has another revolution that establishes Lenin as being the boss of. Not the boss. He's chosen. He's chosen as the leader.
So they had one revolution to get rid of the old, one revolution. to
Yeah,
bring
and then
in
they
the
bring in. Now we've established we're in charge. Lenin says that any like ethnic state should be allowed to split from Russia,
new. Really?
which is I'd never
Fairly
heard
progressive
of,
of Lenin. That
Well,
sounds-
again, super far left guy,
Okay.
right? So Lenin is actually a very progressive thinker in many, many ways, and he's like, no, if they're Finns and they don't want to be, we're the Rus, we are the Rus people, the
Rus.
Kievan Rus. That's
Yeah.
our ancestry. We shouldn't be. It's imperialism for us to conquer other countries, and we're anti-imperialist. We just got
Yeah.
rid of the empire. We're against that wholeheartedly. That is our core founding principle. How unlike our principles do we want to be by saying we run all of these different ethnicities?
Okay.
So anyone who identifies as a different culture, if they want to, can secede. They just have to go through this process, and we'll be like, yeah, that's fine.
Paperwork.
Yes. Well, they want it. They want paper because then they can say we have foundational principle for all this
I just
stuff.
feel like that's
Yeah.
how the communists get you.
But the communists
with
get you with the
paperwork.
paperwork. Yep. Well, did you stamp it? Did you go to Office B at Bureau 8 and get this stamped in triplicate? And
I
did you
only
see
know
this guy?
I only know vague stereotypes of communism from 80s movies and
Yep.
what I believe them to be.
Yeah, and then we have this colored perception, right? Because we have so much propaganda from both sides, and we're going to get into that too. We're actually going to talk about one of the greatest propagandists of all times, who is, by any standard of the word, evil.
Okay.
So we'll talk about him in a moment. And anyway, So Finland has declared its independence, and almost immediately there's a civil war.
In Finland.
In Finland.
So
Because
some people were like, we didn't want to be
they pretty
independent?
much are like, well, it becomes, how do we run this? And it
Oh.
turns into a left versus
Oh,
right thing.
yeah.
But we're not talking left and right by how we see it sometimes in a modern lens. We're
Yeah.
talking communists that want to make Finland into like a social democracy, but like hardcore socialism. And then some of these guys on the right are borderline fascist.
Oh, okay.
So, who are like monarchists and all this other stuff. There's a huge fight. At first, they split it between the Reds and the Whites. The Reds are the communists.
Yep.
The Whites are the conservatives, as they call it.
Sure.
And it seems like the Reds have the upper hand, but Germany gets involved.
Germany.
And Germany, being an imperialist country at this point,
Mhm.
this is
Always so
this is-
helpful,
this is-
Germany.
yeah,
Thanks
this
for
is-
butting in.
This is pre-Adolf.
Yeah.
They're like, we don't want communists north of us. It's bad enough they're over in Germany, in Russia. We don't want them north of Germany. We don't want the communists. Communism bad. So if we're going to help this fledgling nation who needs our guidance,
That sounds very nice.
here you go.
I feel like Germany should just butt out. But okay.
Yeah, so they don't, and they get involved, and then the whites win, which is classic imperialism. The whites win.
In name, the whites, but
And
also,
names, but also,
frankly, the whites.
frankly, the whites. When it comes to imperialism, yeah. Oh, we have guns and germs and steel. That's a book, and it's a good book.
Oh, okay.
Guns, germs, and steel.
Germs and steel?
Guns, germs, and steel.
Germs?
Germs.
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 G-E-R-M.
Smallpox
Okay.
in a blanket. Germs. That's Western imperialism. That's how it works. You go into a country, you have guns. Ooh, bang, bang. You have germs.
Yeah,
and then
okay.
all
I know
sick,
how
and then
that
steel.
works. Okay, all
Stab
right.
the ones who
Got
are
it.
lying down dying.
Okay.
Yes, germs. Sorry.
I thought you said guns, drums, and steel.
I mean, that also.
Yeah.
But they went with the 3G.
Okay.
No, they didn't go. Steel spelled with a G.
Yeah.
Shut up.
Silent G.
It's that silent G at the beginning of steel. It's a German word.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably Polish because it's 3 consonants in a row.
Oh, sure.
GST.
It's like gnocchi.
Yeah. Oh, which is not Polish.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, sure. So, yeah, there's this civil war, which we're not going to go too much into. I know we're 12 minutes in already, or whatever, but
Yeah. Or whatever.
or whatever. And the more conservative side wins, and the Soviet side loses. Now, this is interesting because it's pretty much an even split in the country about who wants what and where and why and when. As these factions start vying for things, the Finnish people eventually go, wait a minute, like, we got the Germans telling us to do something, and the Russians telling us to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we do our own thing?
And Sweden's not telling them to do anything?
Sweden's like,
Oh, okay.
I don't want to poke the bear and make Russia mad, and I don't want to poke the bear and make Germany mad. So I'm just gonna sit here and watch.
Okay.
But we support you, Finland. Sweden's pretty supportive of Finland
Sure.
throughout their history.
Sweden seems nice.
Sweden's pretty chill. So they kick around the idea of having a king, but for like a month. They have a king for a little bit, and they're like, we don't really like that. And eventually they establish themselves as a liberal democracy, much like what we have in America. They have a president, open free elections, all this stuff. And they moderate between this very conservative, pseudo-fascist sole leadership thing or communism. We don't want that either. We want something kind of in the middle. And they make their own thing. And then they kind of start developing this concept of neutrality because they see the imperialism within Germany still and this rise of the Russian power. Lenin has this view of global socialism.
Oh, okay. But he wants everyone
He
to...
does not believe that socialism can exist in one country
Okay.
and not exist globally.
He's
The
probably
only way for socialism to properly work is everybody has to do it.
Yeah.
Which is actually probably
That's
accurate.
probably true,
That's
yeah.
probably accurate.
Or just even in your own country, or wherever you are, it's got to be everyone on board with it.
Yeah, everyone has to be on board with it.
Yeah.
And if everyone is actually willfully, openly on board with it, that's where you get the utopian society
Brilliant.
concept. Like in Star Trek, where everybody's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a meritocracy and it all works this way and we don't need money and we don't need this. But
Yeah.
literally every person has to get on board and not with a gun. Like,
I'm
you
gonna
can't shoot.
guess. I'm gonna guess that Lenin never tried to order a pizza for a room full of people.
I don't. Yeah, I think you're right. Well, and also he's got enough problems trying to organize Russia.
Yeah.
And he seems to have this concept of this is a long-term goal. This is not an immediate goal. But he's also not above using violence if he needs to, because he already did a violence.
It would be nice if we all got along.
Yep.
However,
Now,
I do
during
have an
all
army.
of this, so now we've got Finland has its own liberal democracy and it's doing great. Yay! It's a fledgling nation. It's got some hiccups and it's trying to figure itself out.
Sure.
In Russia, we have Lenin. Now, Lenin's rise to power he is a firebrand. He's a brilliant speaker. He's a passionate guy. He's very well respected. He doesn't have a lot of money.
Oh.
He has a friend who's willing to get him money
yeah, that's good.
by
friends
any
of mine.
means necessary.
Oh, that sounds foreboding.
Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin was born
Hey, I heard of him. He's gonna do great
in
things.
December of 1878.
Okay.
He was poor and he was strong.
Mhm.
And he was very devoted to Lenin.
Okay.
To the point that he would use armed robberies, racketeering, brutality to get money just to fund this revolution.
Thanks for the money.
Yep.
Where'd this come done?
Don't worry about it. And it literally was. Lenin would say, I need money, and Stalin's like, I've got that. I'll take care of it.
Thank you.
Yep. And so he was an enforcer. This is not but he knew how people worked. He was good at maneuvering with people.
Yeah.
The problem is, so we have this background of violence and threats. There's no way this can bleed into his leadership style should he ever take over.
No, I'm sure he'll put that behind him.
Lenin had another guy working for him named Trotsky, and they were kind of the triumvirate that ran the country. You have Stalin is the heavy. You have Trotsky, who's kind of the firebrand thinker. And then you have Lenin, who's a mix of all the things, and the visionary that's guiding them. Lenin gets sick and dies in 1924. So now you have these two other guys vying for power. Now
Trotsky should watch out for pickaxes.
Yeah, Trotsky was super opinionated to the point that he would clash with Lenin. This was used as an excuse to say Trotsky's too extreme and we don't like him. And Stalin is scary.
Wait, when did Stalin die?
You mean Lenin?
No.
No, Lenin died in 1924. Stalin didn't die yet.
I'm sorry.
Stalin's still
I heard
alive.
it and I mixed the two up because I thought.
A lot of people do that. They think that Lenin is as bad as Stalin.
Right.
Lenin is nowhere near what Stalin does.
But
Like
also,
everybody's like, communism's all bad because look what happened to it.
Yeah.
We're going to get into why it got bad
Okay.
because we didn't have huge purges. We had the breakups of like the bourgeois class, the wealthy. We have all these things start to happen in Russia, and we never get to see Lenin's dream fully come true because while he's trying to work on all of this stuff, he gets sick and then he dies. It was an illness. There's no proof of an assassination or anything like this. Now, Stalin takes this moment of his death to build up a cult of personality around Lenin against the widow's wishes. So Lenin's wife doesn't want this to happen. Stalin embalms Lenin's body, and to this day you can still see it.
Oh, is that why they did
perfectly preserved?
Okay.
It's surrounded by flowers in a glass case in Red Square. He's almost deified in a country that bans religion.
Right.
He's like deified.
But Stalin understood that Lenin was beloved somehow. And
Yes,
okay.
and he's the guy doing it. He forces himself basically to be part of the funeral. He's one of Lenin's pallbearers, and he ousts Trotsky. He pushes him out slowly and surely.
Take a trot, Trotsky.
Trotsky's allowed in like public events, but he has no power. And eventually he's driven into exile and then assassinated later. Totally not Stalin who did it.
With a pickaxe.
Probably with a pickaxe. Or a hammer.
I don't know.
Because you get the hammer and then his sickle.
Yeah.
You cross them.
Oh, no, there's a play about it with Trotsky.
Trotsky with his pickaxe, yeah. Well, because he was like a miner and he was one of the people.
So is that play not real?
It probably
that
is.
Okay.
Was he killed with a pickaxe?
That's what I heard. Like he got a pickaxe in the head.
I would have to
And he
dig into that.
And he didn't die like right away either.
Probably not. He was kind of a tough. He was this little.
I don't care.
Well, this is
I don't
Trotsky.
care how tough you are.
This
You
is
got a pickaxe
Trotsky.
in your head. Oh, there he is.
Yeah. No, but you're tough if you don't die right away from a pickaxe.
Yeah, I guess.
But he was just. He's not. Comparatively, that's
Sure.
Trotsky. This is Stalin. So this guy is just. He's big and he's the giant mustache.
Yeah.
He was referred to as the boss.
The
That's what
boss.
people called him. Now, when he first came to power, he didn't put himself in charge. He was in charge of a group of oligarchs, but he wasn't the sole ruler. He actually took second place to his good buddy, a fella named Molotov. Yes, that Molotov.
Sounds
The
del-
Molotov you've
sounds-
heard of? Molotov.
Sounds like a delicious
Now,
cocktail.
yeah, we're also going to get into that.
It seems also that Stalin is a pretty
He's canny.
He's
He's
cagey,
canny.
crafty,
He
wily
is.
fella.
He's cagey. He's like KGB.
Okay.
Ah.
But I mean, to undermine his own ego for the purpose of saying like, oh, Lenin,
He's
he's
playing
awesome.
the long
Like,
game. He's very smart. Like people
Tricky.
always just think he's just this dumb thug. He's
Yeah.
a thug, but he's really smart. Like
I don't
he's not
wanna-
educated.
I don't want to sing the praises of
No,
Stalin
no, no,
too
no,
much.
no, no. But you have to appreciate the cunningness and the
Yeah.
guile behind this, much like you have to appreciate his contemporary Hitler being just like a crafty, charismatic,
Sure.
totally evil man. But you have to appreciate as in not think, oh, that's great,
Yeah.
but go, oh, that's why that worked.
Saying that you have to appreciate Hitler has suddenly made this web series launch way through the roof
We're going.
or canceled. Either
That's
way.
done. We're not saying it that way. Appreciate has multiple meanings. The guy's vile and evil.
Yeah, we are a
Point
nuanced
being,
show.
He has a brilliance that is why he rises to power.
Yeah.
There's nothing good about it.
Correct.
It's if you had put any of that effort towards a good cause,
yeah.
that's impressive. But the fact that Stalin immediately starts using his power to push his enemies aside, to crush them under his heel, and then eventually to kill them. Because then we get into what's called the Great Terror or the Great Purge. In 1936, so it takes him a little bit to ease into this position of power. In 1936,
I'm gonna guess it's not great for everyone.
it is not. It's great in the largeness,
Sure,
not in the
okay.
quality.
Okay.
Well,
we're playing-
well, it's great in quality as well because if you're gonna purge, that was a great one.
We are playing fast and loose with word definitions here.
Yep. Well, it's almost like English is a complex language
Yes.
that has multiple definitions for each.
We're
word.
on your side, whatever you agree with out there.
Shiza. No, we're
That's
not.
not true.
That's
No,
not
that's
true.
not what I said.
That is
That's not what I meant.
true.
I was talking to a specific person.
Yeah. Who?
Me in the future.
You
Hi.
in the future. All right.
me.
Okay. Because we're not. Because we do
Well,
not
we
support.
I'm gonna edit all this.
We're gonna
out.
edit this whole show.
Maybe.
Let's start it over.
Nah. Let it ride.
So what this was is between 1936, August of 1936, and then into 1938, 770,000 to 1.2 million people are killed, specifically for political reasons. This is
That's
not
a lot of people.
This is not famine. This is not anything. This is active, calculated death. Upwards of 40,000 members of the officer class within the military are killed, and this is based solely on preserving the party, preventing a counter-revolution, and Stalin's personal paranoia, thinking this is going to be a problem.
Personally paranoid of 40,000 people.
Just in the military. 1.2 million people total is the higher estimate,
so-
but there might be more. He puts them in gulags. He has them assassinated.
Yeah.
They start creating lists of people who need to be gotten rid of.
Yeah, so what do you have to do to get on this list?
Well, you have to have money. That's a part of it.
To get
not,
on the
not,
list?
Not, this is one way you can get on the list, yes. If you have money or had money pre-revolution,
Okay.
if you
I should be good. I ain't got no money.
Yeah, we're good. If you politically disagree with Stalin publicly,
Well,
if
not
you
publicly.
supported Trotsky,
Mm.
because a lot of his guys were kicked out of the country and sent into exile in 1929, but those who stayed, if you were not a communist, if you were particularly outspokenly religious, if you had any kind of a platform that you could stand against Stalin's specific view of communism,
Okay.
you're out. Now, Stalin is a firm believer in one nation socialism. We can have socialism and don't need to spread it to the rest of the world for it to succeed here.
Okay.
So he's pushing this. People who disagree with that, he gets rid of because they're too revolutionary for him because they might undermine him. Even though that's the core concept of socialism and Leninism is that it needs to be a global effort to bring all of the poor out of the everything. Yada, yada. Also, he starts going after people who like are charismatic but still agree with him.
Oh.
Like he gets rid of people that could be a potential rival for power.
Wow.
Yeah. The culling of the military is the most insane thing because it's something like out of 264 leadership positions, he kills 230 of them. We're
Well-
talking like generals. He just whacks them.
So who's killing them though?
Stalin sometimes personally might kill people. Otherwise, he has his own agents. He has a secret
Personally
police.
killed a million people?
No, but he personally killed some people.
Oh, wow.
Not a lot, but
Okay.
personally did. I mean, that was what he did. He was a heavy. That was his thing. But mostly it's his secret.
What I'm saying is,
police.
though, I mean, with the military stuff, and it's hard to kill your own military.
It is, unless he starts building up what's called a commissariat,
Mm.
which are political officers within the military. You're not Russian enough. You're not, well, you're not communist enough.
Wow.
You're a political agitator. Get rid of them. And they just shoot them. Commissaries are given like the right to just execute people.
Well, that has got to build morale.
Oh, it does. Yes. He has henchmen. I think it's Brezhnev, but I might be wrong about the name. Or is Brezhnev one of his acolytes? Anyway, he has a guy that is his specific. He's the list writer.
Oh.
He's the guy who puts people on lists. If you want to see a brilliant representation of this, there's an absolutely fantastic movie that delves into the character of Stalin and what happens after he eventually dies, and it's called The Death of Stalin.
Oh, yeah.
It is a breathtakingly hilarious dark comedy.
Has it got Stanley Tucci?
No, but it has Steve Buscemi. And Steve Buscemi plays Khrushchev.
Oh, okay. I think I have
Michael
seen that.
Palin of Monty
Yeah, I
Python
think
is
I have
in
seen
it.
that one.
Jason Isaacs is in it, and he plays the ultimate General Zhukov, who is like Stalin's favorite guy ever. Zhukov features into this a little bit because he's this brilliant strategist.
Because is that the one where there's a concert going on, they recorded the concert, and then they re-recorded the
Yes,
concert?
it's because the boss didn't hear it.
Yeah.
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 Yep.
Yeah, that's it.
It's a brilliant movie. I recommend everybody watch it because it's almost 100% accurate. That's
Yeah.
the wildest thing about it.
But it's almost a comedy as well.
It is a comedy. It's
yeah.
portrayed as a black comedy, but then you start to see like the evilness of what Stalin is doing, because this is just the first time he does this. He does this throughout his career, and then because of the way he starts to govern, it causes widespread famine that results in millions of people dying because he does a huge collectivization. Ukrainian people rise up against him because they're like a peasant class, and he's like, nope, you all are part of this communal party farming system, and he just butchers them, which is why Ukraine eventually was like, nah, we're out of this. We don't want to be part of the Soviet Union anymore. This is how we've been treated
So
forever.
this is, at this point, socialism in name only. I mean,
Only.
it's
Yep.
really a dictatorship.
Yes, now he has established
With
that
the
it is
trappings of it.
100%, it's a fascist dictatorship.
Yeah. Okay.
For
your own good.
It wouldn't be called fascism because it lacks certain parts to it, but it's almost identical in certain other parts.
All
This is an autocracy
All right.
where everything's very militant. You see the chests full of medals,
Yeah.
and the military runs things, but it is 100% Stalin is the sole leader. So it is not communism.
Yes.
If communism, everybody one voice for all people kind of a thing, everybody gets a say. This is Stalin's.
Okay.
Stalin owns this. What's wild about this is, like, for the most part, people are like really obsequious to him, and whatever Stalin says, we're going to do it. And Stalin hates those people. But at the same time, if you make him mad, if you stand up to him, he might kill you. So he's got this guy Zhukov who will tell him what he thinks to his face or in front of people and openly question the boss. And Stalin loves him. But Zhukov sees himself as a secondary, always as a secondary.
The first time Zhukov did that, he would be like,
If-
I'm hoping this works.
The thing is, Zhukov didn't care, but everybody else in the room went, "You gonna die." But Stalin had like this awe of Zhukov. He had huge respect for who the man was,
Okay.
and may have been very jealous of him as well.
Oh.
But Zhukov was his general. That's like his favorite guy. Chukov is how the English would spell it. So Zhukov is terrifying. Also, he's in The Death of Stalin, and he's amazing. He's Jason Isaacs, and he is probably the best part of the movie. He's in it for like 10 minutes, and it's brilliant.
Okay.
But Stalin was like, it's thought that he was jealous of the guy, but he had this amazing respect for him because he saw how useful he was and how amazing he was as a general. He believed in like mechanizing the military, so tanks becoming a new thing. Stalin grew up in the times of just tons of infantry and just charge in and it doesn't matter. And Zhukov was like, that's not how we fight anymore.
No.
That's not what we're going to do. Zhukov is actually so impressive of a general that Ike loved him. Eisenhower.
Oh.
They were really good friends. In the time of Stalin, where Eisenhower's like, Stalin's kind of a piece of crap, everybody still liked Zhukov because he was a brilliant general and he wasn't a monster.
Okay. And apparently a good talker.
And holy crap, he was amazing. Another thing that was amazing about him is he could tell Stalin's move by how he smoked his pipe.
Wow.
Like if Stalin took a long drag on the pipe, he knew he was relaxed and chill. If he didn't refill the pipe after he was done with the tobacco, he was about to blow up because he didn't want a lit pipe when he was about to snap on somebody. And if Stalin snapped, you might end up going to the gulag.
Wow. You know what? It feels like I figured that out already now, how to read him by pipe.
Okay. Stalin, can you hold your pipe? Oh, crap. Everybody behave.
Done smoking for now.
Yeah. And gulag. Who's going home? Who's going down?
All right.
Okay, if he switches to chewing tobacco, in comes Stalin with a baseball bat. But yeah, so this is what's going on there. Meanwhile, poor little Finland is watching this happening going, well, I'm glad that we didn't let the Russians run the country after our revolution because holy crap, this is bad.
That went sideways, didn't it? Yeah.
So they start during the 1920s fortifying a region between on this isthmus. I hate that word. ISTHMUS. Isthmus.
We wish you a merry isthmus.
Whoever wrote that word or created that word is a jerk. Isthmus.
I think it was someone falling off of one and drowning. Careful on the isthmus.
So those who don't know, it's essentially a land bridge.
Yeah.
It's between two large bodies of water, and there are several of these between Finland and Russia. There's like 3 big ones.
Okay. There's one locally in Madison, Wisconsin.
You're gonna find that
That's
picture.
right there.
It's
Yeah.
right there. Yeah. There's an isthmus. So they start fortifying this one in a region called Karelia. Karelia is part of it is in Russia, and part of it is in Finland, and it's like this very Finnish region. So that's why there's some of this, but it's close to Leningrad.
Okay.
And the Russians don't like that. So the Finns are like, no, Russia's big, maybe military. Let's just put a little fortification in between here.
Sure.
And so it's in the 1920s.
A nice fence, maybe.
Just in case, because they don't know how the revolutions are all going to go. Once things start, like, because Russia's still sorting stuff out in the 20s. And then when Lenin dies, Finland gets nervous again. And then when Stalin does the purge, they're like, okay, this is really starting to look bad. Meanwhile, Adolf Hitler, who's awful. Sorry. That was I just wanted to jump into
I
that.
didn't know that he was involved.
I had no idea. So Adolf Hitler shows
He's
up.
always jumping up.
He just pops up. He's like the most evil whack-a-mole. Just can't get on the camera fast enough. We hate this guy.
Hello.
Adolf Hitler shows up and he begins his rise to power in Germany.
Here I am.
This begins in like the 1920s into the 1930s.
Yeah.
He does his fascist rise, which deserves
That's
its own.
a thing as well. Hitler's most popular for like the 40s, like that's when you know about him. But he was around a while. He worked his way up.
He worked his way through.
Gotta admire.
No, you don't gotta admire.
You don't have to admire him.
You don't have to admire anything, but you do again have to appreciate the way that he manipulated people. So fascism is rooted on things like undermining the free press, militarizing the police forces, and picking a group to other.
Yes.
So for him, it was the Jews, but not just the Jews, also the Catholics, homosexuals, and socialists.
Because you want someone to be angry at.
So this is one of my big gripes when people talk about, the Nazis were socialists because they're National Socialist Party. Mm-hmm. One of the main groups that they butchered were socialists. Yeah. They hated socialists. They used the term socialist more as a joke within the party. But one of the biggest groups they targeted were actual communist believers and socialists because they saw them as radicals and they did not want to happen to them what happened in Russia, where the rich were either removed or displaced. They didn't want Leninism to rise up. So they killed those people. They put them right in camps. Notice the Russians have gulags and the Germans have these concentration camps. They're very similar on so many levels in how they handle the different people that they hate. Yeah. And it's
not through talking.
No. But
here's how we handle the people we hate.
It's not discussions. Yeah, and just this rampant hatred of people who are different largely from the circumstances of their birth. Jews can't help that they're Jewish.
That's true.
Homosexuals cannot help that they're homosexual.
That's true.
Socialists could maybe, but
I guess.
Because that's like an educational thing, it's a learning thing. But still, they just have different ideas. These guys aren't running around throwing bombs at people. They're just talking for the most part, and they want a different life. And Hitler immediately is like, no. 9. Starts killing people.
Yes.
So Hitler has done his rise to power, and he sees the Soviet Union as a potential threat. The Soviets see him as a threat, so they start having conversations to figure out how to not murderify each other.
They start having conversations. Well, that's nice. I'm glad they're talking.
Note the guys who are fine with gulags and murder camps are like, yeah, let's have a talk. We should talk. Because we both believe in murder camps, and we both believe in total autocratic authoritarian leadership. So I've
seen Freddy versus Jason.
Yes. So they get into that. Yes. They have a non-aggression pact.
Okay.
And just like in Freddy versus Jason, it does not last, as we know, because in World War II, they end up on opposite sides.
Yeah.
But for this, they have the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. This Molotov guy again, the ultimate propagandist. He basically is the architect of this. It is a non-aggression treaty between Nazi Germany and Stalinist Russia that says, we're not going to fight each other. Promises. There's also a secret pact within the non-aggression treaty. And it's called the Secret Protocol that wasn't revealed until like really recently.
Really?
After the war. Nobody knew about this during the war. But this is after the war. They got into the details of it and they're like, holy moly, this came out. It split Europe into spheres of influence between Russia and Germany. And it was basically like Germans get like Eastern Europe and Southern Europe. We get like Greece and we get this. Yeah. Russia gets Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Finland. Mm-hmm. And it said, in the event that you want to conquer those countries, I will support you and you are fine doing that. And then I get to conquer these countries. And that's how we'll split up the world when we conquer everything and win the war.
Okay. Surely then their plan on either side was like, and then after that.
And then after that. But still, the fact is that they were like,
yeah.
So when we do eventually, because we both know we're going to start some wars.
Yeah. We know us.
We know what's happening. Almost immediately after this pact is signed, September 1st. So that was the Ribbentrop Act is in August. In September 1st, Hitler invades Poland.
Hey.
And then 16 days later, Russia invades Poland. Mm-hmm. A lot of people skip over that part that Russia does invade Poland at the same time. Oh. And they both conquer half of Poland and split it up.
So their plan is going well.
Their plan is going brilliantly.
Everyone's planning.
Now everybody else in the world goes, oh crap, this isn't great. And poor little Finland is stuck. Well, it's not little, but the population is small. Is stuck in between Germany to its south and Russia to its east and goes, oh God.
Also,
get ready.
Poor little Poland.
Well, poor little Poland.
I feel like Poland was just standing there in the middle of a road.
Yeah, exactly. Poland's like, oh, this isn't great. And it starts with Germany going, you will give us back this free city, and you will give us this, and you will give us that, and you will give us this. And Poland can't possibly concede. Mm-hmm. And so Hitler just goes, well, you didn't give me what I wanted, so it's a complete nonsense pretext for war. Meanwhile, now we go back to Finland. And now we will actually focus on the Winter War itself. 40 minutes into the thing. I knew I was going to get distracted talking about the monsters of Stalin and Hitler. So neither of these guys trust each other. Stalin is really convinced Hitler now is going to invade him. Mm-hmm. So he says, Finland, you know those fortifications you're building on the isthmus?
We like those.
I want those. I also want these islands. And in fact, the fortifications, you don't even need to give them to me. You just need to dismantle all of them. Because if Germany comes through you, I don't want them having forts.
Oh, I see.
And I want these islands so I can put like artillery detachments there in case German ships come through and I can shoot them. And we want this much land from you to move the border back away from Leningrad because it's only 30 kilometers away from your territory, and we don't like that. Finland's like, you just murdered like 1 million people. We're going to have to say no for that.
We're going to have to say no.
They start negotiations. And in November, the Finns go to Moscow to talk this out. And they say, not all of the Finns, just a couple.
We brought everyone.
We all here. We want to talk.
I don't know if that was a Finnish accent, but it sounded right to me.
Finnish is a very complicated one, so I don't try to do it very much. Because I should have listened to it. But they have words like ussisloni, which is a really delicious dessert.
That's good.
I'm going to try to struggle with some of the names.
Okay.
Anyway, so they go to talk to the Russians, and they're like, okay, so you offered to lease islands from us, which we're cool with.
Sure. Borrow the islands.
But you can borrow the islands. We cannot give you this much land, but we'll double the distance from our border to Leningrad, if that's cool. And they're like, that's not enough. We need more than 60 kilometers. We need like 100. So Finland is trying to negotiate with it. But they're obviously like not going to just be like, oh yeah, whatever you guys want is fine, because your collectivism that has killed all of these people and
We've been watching.
We've been watching.
We've been watching what you've
And
been
you just
doing.
invaded Poland. Like, we're really...
We get newspapers here.
We're right next door. We saw it. We live next to you.
Oh, no.
Where's their army going? Poland. Oh.
Okay.
Where's Poland? Just a little south?
Okay.
What if they went west? Oh, they'd hit us. Oh. How? Oh.
Yeah.
We don't like that.
No.
So they were very nervous about
That
this.
would be, yes.
I think November 18th is when the discussion stopped and the Finns went home. And they're like, okay, we'll be invited back while they mull this over.
Okay.
Poor Finland.
Poor.
Meanwhile, the Finns are not just assuming everything's going to be fine. They have Field Marshal Baron Carl Gustav Emil Mannerheim.
All right.
For the extent of this, we're going to all call him Mannerheim. This is him. This is a very austere gentleman who is not going to mess around. He is a fighter. He is a planner. He is a thinker. And he's like, Stalin's going to try to kill us. So here's what we're going to do. Be ready. He's a big believer in the Finnish people have to be prepared. So they have what's called the Civil Guard. That is basically the National Guard. They're reservists. Okay. They are not an active military unit, but they are all trained in certain skills. They're trained how to shoot. They're trained basic survival techniques. In Finland, this includes skiing.
Probably
actually
skiing.
Is a major thing because like it's just snow and hills everywhere. So you got to know how to ski. They're Finnish, so they're all big into warm weather clothing or in cold weather, like because the seasons shift so much, like how to prepare for the different seasons. Camouflage is a big one. And then they make this line of fortifications that he's been building up over time that eventually becomes called the Mannerheim Line after him.
The Mannerheim Line.
Mannerheim Line. And it's... Molotov tries to paint it throughout the war as bigger than the Maginot Line. The Maginot Line was a French line of fortifications that was concrete bunkers and what were called dragon's teeth, which were these huge chunks of concrete that from a distance looked like teeth. Oh. And if the tank rolled into them, would get hung up and couldn't move any further. Yeah. And there was actually a rail system that linked all the bunkers together. There were mounted cannon, the machine gun nests everywhere. Unbelievable amount.
This stuff from World War One. Yeah?
This is for World War II. This is in preparation of the Germans are coming.
Okay.
But it was built based on the concept of the trench warfare of World War I, where they're like, that went really, 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 really badly for France. So we're going to build a wall of death.
Instead of building down,
we're going to build. The trenches they do have are concrete reinforced now. So there's tons and tons and tons of this stuff. Molotov says the Mannerheim Line is bigger and scarier. The Mannerheim Line had a total of 157 machine gun nests and like 8 artillery platforms. The total amount of concrete used to make the entire line was less than what it took to make the Helsinki Opera House. Oh. So it's not.
It's some thin concrete.
It's not big. It's there's like a couple. There's I think a bunker every few kilometers. Okay. But what they used are trees and boulders and natural fortifications. And it was built here. So this is lots of lakes and swamps and just hellish terrain, especially for anything moving through there. If you're a tank, you can get bogged down by all the trees and stuff that are gunking up the treads. And then if you're the infantry, you have to move through a swamp. That sucks. And there's no way to have like a cool phalanx of just a wall of death walking forward because it's trees.
Okay.
That's before it gets cold. I don't know who knows this, but Finland gets cold.
Yeah, I bet.
So, Russia starts planning. They saw what worked in Poland, and they're like, we're going to do that again. Zhukov says, this is a stupid idea. I just fought a war against Japan, and here's what worked. Oh. And then everyone says, no, we're not listening to Zhukov. And he says, fine, do your own thing.
Okay.
What do I know about mechanized warfare? I only helped invent the damn thing. I know nothing. And for some reason, They don't listen to Zhukov.
Huh.
The best general in their military, they're like, no, we're going to do this.
Okay.
And this is still at the time, though, where it was like political people had more power than the actual military.
Sure.
So you could be Mr. Snooty McSnooterton, I know more about the party than you do.
Yeah.
And you get to tell the military genius how to military.
Yeah.
Not
okay.
very smart, fortunately for the Finns, because here's what goes down. On the 26th of November, so 8 whole days after this negotiation, they're like, oh, it's fine. The town of Manila is shelled, allegedly from the Finnish side. Unfortunately for the lying Molotov who said the Finns shelled this town, this Russian town, there are no artillery divisions on the Finnish side of the border anywhere near there. There are, however, Russian artillery units. And there was a war game that they'd been doing throughout the Russian military based on the idea of a false flag operation to shell a small town on their border and invade Finland.
Okay.
So Russia shelled their own town and then said, Finland did it.
Now, the general public probably doesn't know all
The general public doesn't know it. All of the Finnish go, what?
Yeah.
Then the Russians like, oh yeah, it's totally fine. It's
Who
totally
are you
fine.
going to believe?
Yep, and Molotov.
Would I be crazy enough to shoot myself?
Exactly. And Molotov is the expert propagandist. He's on the radio. He's shouting about all this. The Finns. He says the Finns are a fascist clique. And he literally uses that term, fascist clique.
Suddenly this
They're
sounds
no
very
different.
petty.
They're no different than the Nazis because during their revolution, the whites beat the reds.
Yep.
So they're like, they hate communists. And during that war, they treated communists very, very badly. There were thousands who died in captivity. It was really bad. But they're not fascist. Like all the Finns are like, wait, what? We don't have that problem. Meanwhile, the Russians also set up a fake regime of Finnish people on the Russian side of the Karelian Isthmus. So like where the Finnish people that are technically living in Russia, they make their own little government there and they're like, oh look, these are the actual Finns and they hate the rest of Finland. Meanwhile, and the Finnish people support them. However, the overwhelming majority of Finland, like all of the Finnish people, are like, no, that's not a real government. We didn't elect them. You guys are nuts. There's no way this is going to go the way they think it is. So and yet, 1 day later, Russia sends in a huge amount of planes and they bomb Helsinki. Kills 100 people, which isn't a huge amount, and destroys 50 buildings. Helsinki is the capital of Finland. It's the highest population center, and they just bombard it.
Only killed 100 people?
Only killed 100 people.
Some
so the
crappy
Finns,
bombs.
and also the Finns were ready for them.
Oh, okay.
But yes, the Finns are like, oh, yeah, they have lead umbrellas. And they're just like, quite a bit of rain today.
Yeah.
Huh?
It's cold out, isn't
cold
it?
out.
It's still cold,
Do you think the weather will get better?
You want the herring?
Yeah. Well, I better get on my anti-aircraft gun. Gotta shoot down the weather. Molotov says, we weren't dropping bombs, we were dropping food. This is humanitarian aid.
Oh.
So the Finns, in the spirit of Sisu, just being grim, determined, tough SOBs, go,
Ate the bombs. No.
actually, they refer to those as Molotov bread baskets.
Oh.
Like, yes, the old Molotov bread basket.
Thanks.
It's delicious. Thank you
delicious.
so much.
Thank you.
We love those Molotov
More,
bread
please.
baskets. Meanwhile, the League of Nations, which is the precursor to the United Nations,
Yes.
in which Finland and Russia both are members, goes, we decry this. On December 1st, they kick Russia out. That's their big, you're out.
Okay.
And Britain and France are like, yeah, we're going to go and fight the Russians. And they allegedly they say they start building up forces to send in. And the Germans blockade Finland so that they can't help.
Oh.
Which is a bit of brilliant long-term planning.
Yeah.
Because then the Finns are like, why didn't you guys help us? Like, they're still mad that the Germans blockaded them.
Yeah.
But they didn't get any help. The Swedes, however, and the Danes send like 8,000 troops combined. They think it's like 6,000 Swedes, 1,000 Danes, and then a few hundred from all over the other places. Like even Italians show up, which is really weird. But a bunch of Italians show up in Finland like, we're here to fight Russia. We hate them.
It's so confusing to live in Finland.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. And the Finns are like, we will take all the help we can get.
Right.
Now, here's the difference in the militaries at this time. The Finns have 300 to 340,000 troops. The difference is it escalates, the numbers grow over time. So this isn't like an estimate, this is the numbers grow.
Okay.
So by the end of the war, they've had 340,000 soldiers fighting. They have 32 tanks. 32. And 114 aircraft.
Okay.
These are not new aircraft. These are from like World War I.
Oh, okay.
These are
Made
like
out of canvas and
like it's glue and paint. We went to Hobbytown.
Okay.
We bought a bunch of model kits.
Propellers, you got to.
Yep, it's just big rubber band. No, but yeah, they did. They had to do like the crank starts and all this. They're very tough planes because they can survive flying around in Finland.
Sure.
But these are not new. These are jets. These aren't the high-end cool things. And their tanks are kind of, they're not great. The Soviets, at the start of the war, have 425,000 men.
Ooh.
So already more.
Yep.
And then it escalates to 760,000.
Yeah, I've played Risk.
Yep. They have 2,514 tanks. By the end, they have 6,541 tanks.
Wow. Even if those are crappy tanks, there's still more things.
And these are Soviet tanks. So Soviet tanks are actually quite good at this point. They have, I should have written down the numbers. I think they have the T2. But they have, the Soviets really started getting into this tank idea.
The T2, that's really dangerous.
It's liquid metal.
Yeah.
It's a T1000, sorry. But they have armored cars is a big thing too, so they can transport infantry. This is a monumental thing. And then they have 3,800 aircraft. So Finns have 32 tanks against 2,500 tanks. And 114 aircraft versus 3,800. The Finns are fine.
They'll be okay.
They'll be fine. Because they have the Mannerheim line, which is, according to Molotov, better than the Maginot line, which is a total lie. I can't express how much. Like, I think I was reading in the same area of line, like if you took how big the Mannerheim line is, and like when they have like a bunker, the French would have like 500 bunkers in the same amount of land. It is insane. Like the difference. Like it's like France took a country worth of concrete and went, you'll never get in.
It does feel like that's the kind of lie, though, that Molotov was talking, that is going to be found out.
Eventually. Because the reason he starts selling this up is what happens during the Winter War. These troops swarm in. Starting November 30th is when the real invasion begins.
Here we go.
And we've got hundreds of thousands of foot troops. We've got thousands of tanks. We have all these airplanes. The planes come in. The biggest raid that the Russians did with their air support was in Helsinki. Was that killed 100 people, blew up 50 buildings. The Finnish counterattacks. First of all, their anti-artillery or anti-aircraft batteries shoot down 300 planes, which is awesome. Go Finland. Their pilots, their forward bases are literally frozen lakes with a sock on a pole to show wind direction.
Okay.
And that's it, and like a shack. So they're flying these little.
Ooh, landed on ice.
Yeah,
and
they would land on a lake and take off from a lake. And the Russians lost something like 500 planes just to bad weather.
Oh.
They were not prepared for this. The Russian planes lost.
Why aren't they ready for this? Aren't they in cold weather too?
They are, but apparently not Finland. Apparently Finland just gets worse.
Okay.
Finland is just nuts. So that's their air game. The Russians don't really use their superior air power like how the U.S. does in World War II.
Efficiently. Yeah,
not very efficiently. Yeah. And again, with the weather being what it is, because they're going into winter.
Yeah.
Russia has always been like, ha, Grandfather Winter will protect us. You're going to die. They forgot Finland gets really, really, really cold.
Oh, that's good.
So
I mean, that's funny.
Yeah.
That happens to Russia. Like people try to attack Russia all the time.
France, when Napoleon went, he's like, it's so cold.
It's funny to go the other
now
way.
the shoes on the other foot now. Ha-ha!
Take that. There's always somewhere colder.
Yep. So these tanks come swarming in, and the Finns just go, the hell is that? How are we supposed to fight that?
Yeah.
It's a wall of steel death.
Okay.
One of their little squadrons of tanks is more than all the tanks we have in Finland. How do we fight this?
It's a bad day.
Well, they run. at first.
Sure, that's
So
what I would
the
do.
way that they have this Mannerheim line is actually they have this line of basically logs, boulders, a few bunkers, some machine gun nests, stuff like that. But then they do layered defense where they have people out in front of this who shoot as the bad guy, not the bad guys, but the opponents are coming in,
Yeah.
and then they retreat. That's the concept of layered defense. You
Okay.
shoot until your position is going to get overrun, and then you retreat back to the next line, and the next,
Yeah.
and the next, and the next.
Ideally, you don't retreat, but yes.
Right. It's a tactical withdrawal.
Right,
So
yes.
retreat is running and being crazy and terror. Tactically moving backwards to the next line.
Sure.
It's a fallback, and that's a perfectly viable strategy that's worked
Sure.
for forever throughout the military. And using the terrain to your advantage. So they start laying out like mines and barbed wire and into this swampy, awful terrain, and the Russians are just struggling. But to deal with the tanks, what the Finns eventually do, in the spirit of Sisu, is they charge the tanks on foot with logs and crowbars.
Get them!
And they stuff the logs into the smaller wheels of the tanks
Okay.
treads, and they immobilize them.
Oh.
Then they come up with this handy idea of taking a glass bottle filled with fuel with a rag stuffed in the top,
Ah.
light it on fire, and pitch it in. And they call it a Molotov cocktail
Yeah.
to go with his bread baskets.
Oh, nice.
Because they need something to drink with the Molotov bread basket. I love that.
That's
That
nice.
is the definition of Sisu. Like, just,
nice.
well, you need something to drink with that bread basket. Local breweries, like that, are bottling companies,
Yeah.
start making Molotov cocktail sets.
Wow.
They come with as many rags as you need and a book of matches to go with it. It's
That
amazing.
does seem like a dangerous thing, though,
Super
to go
dangerous.
wrong.
Super
Like,
dangerous.
just-
Super dangerous.
I've
But-
dropped bottles many times.
yeah, yeah, you don't want to screw up. If you drop a Molotov cocktail, you are now on fire.
Yeah.
So you have to be very careful.
Careful, kids.
But still, the Finns
don't
are
don't do that.
Don't
And
do that.
This is not an advice
not
video.
Molotov
Anything. Yeah. Just,
ever.
just
It's fine in a video game.
put the matches down.
Put them down. Put
Yeah.
them down.
That should solve.
Unless you get invaded by tanks. That's the only
Sure,
time,
sure,
I guess,
sure,
if
sure,
you get
sure.
invaded by tanks. That's when you would do that. So these guys are rushing out into the teeth of these guns, and they're like, oh, if we get past the guns and we maneuver
Sure.
through this rough terrain and we just throw a log into the thing and it stops the tank, we can swarm over the tanks and kill them. They kill 40 tanks in the first attack this way.
This works well.
The Russians are
almost
like,
their whole
what
tank."
just happened?
Yeah.
These tanks should have rolled through these guys. We're like, well, the terrain sucks, and these people are crazy, and they're charging the tanks. And all our infantry are just getting butchered because we don't know where they are. They're in this line of trees and sticks and boulders, and they're all camouflaged, and it's insane. The majority of the Finnish military at this time are civilians.
Oh.
They're reservists. They're not wearing uniforms. They might have like some rank sewn on,
Yeah.
and that's it.
All right.
They're just like, nope, we're here to fight for our country.
Yep.
Let's just bring it on. So that's the Mannerheim line. Now, in the rest of the attacks, it's worse terrain, and they did not build up these big fortifications. It's colder, it's nastier, so they just have this kind of layered defensive strategy again. The Finns start to develop a concept where they make pockets, they call them. I should have written down the Finnish word, but I couldn't pronounce it, so I didn't. But the concept is they take the Soviets, who are much larger than them, and get them into isolated clumps and surround them
Oh.
and just crunch in on them
Yeah.
and murder them.
Okay.
That's their plan.
Good plan.
It works amazingly, and the Russians hate it. However, the Russian soldiers are stuck between death, death, and death.
Yeah.
They can either get killed by the Finns, killed by their own officers for being cowards,
Mhm.
or die from exposure.
There you go.
So they note surrender. Because they're also told by Russian propagandists and their commissars, the Finns will torture and murder you if you surrender.
Oh.
Which is proven to be not true, because in all the cases I found of the Finns capturing the Russians, in some cases they're super nice to them. In most cases they make them do like forced labor, but almost all of them were freed. A few hundred probably
Okay.
died during the war, whereas the Russians killed like 20 or 30% of the prisoners because of poor treatment. Now winter hits,
Haha.
and they refer to it as the White Death
Oh.
because
Winter is coming.
it is savage. Temperatures drop to minus 43 degrees Fahrenheit,
Chilly.
which is minus 45 degrees Celsius. I don't
After minus 0, it
Yep,
doesn't make
after minus anything. Yep. So this is not counting a wind chill. Oh, I'm sorry. It's minus 45 Fahrenheit, minus 43 Celsius. Either way, this is death.
Yeah.
The Russians don't have clothes for this, for the most part.
Who does?
Upwards of 60,000 Russians are taken out by frostbite illness.
Yikes.
Not necessarily death, but that's the frostbite casualties.
Yeah.
But thousands die from this. They also encounter a different White Death during this time. The Battle of Kola is a small town. Kola is. It's a small region. It is led by a guy known as, these guys all have great names, the Terror of Morocco.
Ooh.
Because he served in the French Foreign Legion in Morocco and was apparently just a badass. And then he came back to Finland and like, you're going to be a captain in the military. At this time, he's just a lieutenant. And he heads this platoon of soldiers who are just like a rifle company. They fall back to the other side of a stream as the Russians come pouring in and just hold on to the region. It's got high ridges. It's got a natural terrain that works well. And then winter hits hard. A man who is 5 feet 3 inches tall.
It's a small little guy.
With no formal training. Born in the boonies. Named Simo Hailha.
Yeah.
Decides he's going to kill some Russians.
Okay. Okay, little guy.
He wears a cape.
Mm,
A little white cape.
Sure.
And because he's tiny, it helps conceal him.
Yeah, that would.
When he shoots, he only uses iron sights, which is just the basic sights of the rifle.
Okay.
He doesn't believe in using a scope because a scope can fog up in the winter or crack because of the cold. Also, he has to lift his head a little higher to look through the scope, so that makes him more vulnerable to enemy fire.
Okay.
In the span
5'3", he's not
of
vulnerable, though. He's short.
2 months, I think it's 2 months, he kills more than 500 enemy soldiers, according to his calculations. The lowest calculations are something like 250.
So either way, it's still...
Either way,
yeah.
He has the highest official sniper kill total of anybody in the history of sniping. Now, I don't want to dog too much on him because he's actually ashamed of his killing so many people.
Just good at
He
it.
didn't like that. He was eventually shot in the face with an explosive bullet.
Eee, that doesn't sound
And
good.
this is his image after of his portrait. So his face gets caved in, and that takes him out of the fight.
Yeah, that would.
He lives.
Eee.
But he loses like a significant portion of his upper and lower jaw, and it messes him up for the rest of his life. After the war ends, there's another war a little bit later called the Continuation War, and he volunteers. And they say, no, you haven't healed yet. It takes him years to heal.
Okay.
Eventually, he just becomes a quiet man. They give him a farm. He's considered like one of the greatest heroes of the war. He does all of this fighting, but he doesn't like to talk about it. He doesn't want to be glorified for it. And they don't know his own personal kill total until they find it after his death.
Oh.
And they're like, holy crap, whoa. And then they start to measure things up, and they're like, okay, this isn't great. The concept of the White Death is actually originally coined by the Finns to describe him, but they say the Russians talked about the White Death and they meant him. But it was probably the Russians calling the winter murdering them the White Death.
Could be both.
Yes,
Right.
It's probably a combination of the two. But this is a battle of who's got the best propaganda at this time. You've got Molotov doing all of his lies about this. So they're like, they're going to we need war heroes. So they prop up Simo, who is, even if you use the most minimal versions of what he did, terrifying as a sniper. But I really respect that. His view was still very much the Sisu. I do this because I have to. I do this for my people. And he said, when somebody asked, how did you get so good as a sniper? He just said, practice. That's it. That was his one response.
Same way you get to Carnegie Hall.
Yeah. And then they were like, and how do you explain like your heroism and all this? And he said, if everyone hadn't fought as hard as I did, we would not be a country. So he didn't take credit.
There's no I in team.
Yeah,
Got it.
Is amazing. Absolutely amazing character. I love him. So the war is basically almost done at this point. The Russians are getting their butts handed to them, and Stalin says, enough! We're redoing it.
Okay.
We're redoing our approach. What do they have? They have like no artillery. They have no ammunition. The only way, like the Finns are looting Russian bodies to get bullets. They had at the start of the war like 20 days worth of bullets. Yeah, and the Russians like, how are we losing? Somebody fix this. Zhukov, where's Zhukov?
Yes.
Fix this. So they changed the entire approach to, well, they don't have artillery. We're just going to pound the hell out of the line with artillery fire. And the poor Finns don't really have anything they can do about this.
Yeah.
They get, like, slowly the line starts to have to fall back. Even though the Mannerheim line is really effective against infantry and tanks. It can't stop artillery. Artillery just crushes all of their bunkers. They've got nothing. So they start to fall back, and the Finnish government finds a workaround to build a truce. They reach out through a German to a Russian to a Swede kind of a thing. Like, I have a friend who's a Soviet that knows the ambassador to Sweden, and we can meet in Sweden, and you guys can talk about a peace treaty.
So no one really wants to be the one to say.
Because the Russians won't listen at first. The Finns are trying to talk to the Russians, and Molotov is like, we don't talk to you. You made me look stupid. They get this to work out, and finally the Finns get together with the Russians, and on 12 March 1940, peace is declared temporarily. Because, like, 3 years later, they start fighting again.
Yeah, you're familiar with what happens after 1940.
Yeah. So what this does is the results are Russia gains their territory, but at an unbelievable cost. The Finns lose 25,904 dead. 43,557 are wounded. The Russians lose between 126,000 and 167,000, depends on whose numbers you look at. Yeah. That's dead. Almost upward, potentially 207,000 are wounded or sick, including the 60,000 from frostbite. They lose between 1,200 and 3,500 tanks, and just from enemy fire, 261 to 500 and some odd planes are shot down. So they take this huge kicking from this army over 105 days. The Finns are temporarily, like, they're kind of crushed by this. Yeah. Like, they feel awful because they got bullied by the Russians and nobody came to help them except Sweden and Denmark. Like, their longtime buddies, like their cultural allies show up. But the League of Nations, all they did was go, bad Russia, and they didn't help.
Paperwork. They
didn't get any guns. They got very little global support. So they felt ostracized and pushed down and kicked down, even though they outkill the Russians like 5-1 or more, not counting wounding and all this other stuff. This is a huge hit. Because they had to basically take all of their people out of the fields to fight, they have a rough winter ahead of them. They don't have as much food as they should. Their economy takes a huge hit. They lose like 13% of their economic ability because of the land Russia takes, because they take way more than they originally wanted. But what this paints then is Hitler sees how ineffective the Russian military was. Oh. And he says, well, they're not that scary.
They look scary.
In June, he says, we have only to kick in the door and the entire rotten structure will collapse. And then later in June of 1940, he begins Operation Barbarossa, which is when they storm into Russia and they fight him because he says, look how bad they did.
Yeah.
This also makes the Finns ally with the Germans because they hate the Russians so much for what Russia did. And because England and France didn't help them out, even though Germany blockaded them, they're like, these are the only guys who are willing to help us fight and take back our land. So the Finns actually get tied up as an Axis power and considered on the same page as the Germans, even though it's an alliance of convenience to fight against people who were butchering them with people who are monsters. So poor Finland is caught exactly where they didn't want to be, caught between two superpowers, and they have to make a dirty alliance. And it's specifically just to fight Russia. They don't help with the German genocides of the Jews and the Poles and the Roma and anything else. But this creates this huge kerfuffle of awfulness for the poor Finnish people who get stuck in the middle. And then they have the second war, and it's more of the same, where they outkill the Russians 5-1, and it's horrible and awfulness all around. Eventually, obviously, we know that the end of the war happens. The Russians are on the Allies' side. The Germans are the Axis. They lose. But it creates this constant view of Russia can't be trusted to not invade all of their neighbors. And we can see certain parallels throughout history afterwards. So that's the Winter War. I went way over, but I needed to discuss so much stuff.
We did go over time. I, as always, blame Hitler.
This is the worst.
Thank you, Will. And this is our foray into the 20th century. That was fun. I enjoyed it.
Did you appreciate it?
I did appreciate it. As much as I appreciate Hitler.
Yeah.
All right.
That's not great.
So if you have any comments or suggestions or want to rip on me for mentioning Hitler,
Yep. The stupidity of the English language, we appreciate, means 3 different things.
Like and subscribe. Also, you can check out our Patreon page. It's mostly like my Patreon page, but it goes to support all this kind of stuff that we do here. So let's check that out. And tune in for us next week. Next week we're going to be going on to
the birth of Gustavus Adolphus.
Who
I think we haven't talked about yet. I'm actually going to go back through and make sure we haven't talked about him, because if he's had his own episode, I might change it.
Okay, well, then tune in.
Tune in. Exciting. Now it's a surprise.
All right. Thanks, Will.
Thanks, Mike.
We'll see you next week.
All right. Bye.